a global perspective of ITER, and it is about the global transformation happening. We're analyzing the role of Russia already in Africa in present context. And then you were talking about a statement made by Russian President Vladimir Putin last July pertaining the Russia's support for Africa to ensuring that there is in fact utmost security for the continent.
Sure, because there cannot be any investment of any significance if there's no stability, political stability and security on the ground. This is actually the approach privileged by the Popular Republic of China in as far as the One Belt, One Road initiative. It's important fundamentally and before all else that every 4 years of instability be doused with water and extinguished. And so the same principle applies to Africa.
Absolutely.
You're not going to be able to improve the livelihood of people living there, if you don't resolve the political dispute. So that's the first phase in which those two giants, just an apartheid actually, because China has been in Africa for at least 25 years now.
Sure.
But they did not have the political clout that they have today. So they were just coming in to invest quietly and create somehow of a presence, but investing in the future, keeping in mind that they had to themselves keep their development going so as to reach quasi-parity with the United States in terms of economic clout and soon to be military clout.
Absolutely, and of course with that we enter the global world. It's about international cooperation, and when we talk international cooperation, we actually involve all the stakeholders: Europe, Africa, Middle East, and you can name the rest, and it brings us to a turning point of global geopolitics that is taking a new perspective. I want us to kickstart this with Russia-Africa ties. Since the start of the first Russia-Africa summit, I think that was in 2019, perspectives have changed across Africa, and you even see other countries like the US and Turkey, other countries wanting to solidify ties with Africa, and it brings us to the era of multilateralism. So now, how will you explain the changes at the geopolitical level, and how Africa, being the main player, a major player, let me say, in this geopolitical competition, how will you explain this, and how can the continent capitalize on this for its benefits?
Well, basically, those forces that will provide the driving force in making sure that Africa comes and takes its seats at the table in the multipolar world will definitely win out. It's as simple as that. The old ways are a thing of the past now. And the difference between 2019 and 2024, or should we say July 2023, because this was the last major political event.
Sure.
But we're talking about a different world in 4 years. The world has completely changed.
Absolutely, yeah.
Obviously, the health crisis has really, transformed the landscape. But then we had the crisis in Ukraine. And here we're talking about the NATO, the armed component of the Western system of predatory domination that is now being on the verge of suffering a strategic defeat in Ukraine. So this was somehow the clarion call to worldwide insurrections. And what is the concrete expression of this worldwide insurrection is that BRICS, which was somewhat of a discussion forum outside the G20 format. Now he's becoming increasingly a counterweight to the G7. You know, G7 being the core, expanded to the G20, where they would be on the periphery of the G7. But now the G20 becomes completely obsolete. So now we have those G7 who are increasingly wealthy only on paper because their industrial base is gone.
Absolutely.
They have no natural resources to speak of. What we thought made them so formidable, i.e. the military aspect, is now being revealed as being a paper tiger.
And of course, just to complement that, a recent report by the International Monetary Fund presents BRICS in terms of its gross domestic product. It is about 36% higher than the group of 7 so-called developed economies, and of course in population, and we're seeing the disparity. So in this world of multi-polarity, what do you think are those major factors shaping it, and how can we, because there are still some pundits who feel like it's just an ideology and it is not really a pragmatic or practical on paper, and it wouldn't actually ensure peace in the global state. So do you share that same perspective, or what is your own connotation regarding the multipolarity in the world, especially as far as emerging powers or economies are concerned?
Well, to begin with, I mean, the unipolar world, far from providing peace and security and stability, was an era characterized by constant war and invasions and destabilization of countries and flows of refugees. So it's hard to argue that multipolarity could be worse than what unipolar world has now come to be known for.
Indeed.
So on the contrary, I think a multipolar world with alternate systems of groupings, you know, being i.e. not necessarily in opposition to the global West, but some kind of an emancipation from the latter, will provide the peace and the stability, because now, with emerging economies, economic powerhouses, competitive markets, I mean, all the investment is going to be redirecting itself to those regions.
Absolutely.
Because business is business.
Indeed.
And you were mentioning the GDP of those countries. It's all artificial, we know that. I mean, they even take into account prostitution and drug trafficking into their GDP in the West. The West does not produce anything. It's all financial alchemy. It's all merger and acquisition. So you have this very thin oligarchical class controlling all the basically means of production, which are more and more services oriented and software communication. This is not what makes a country an economic powerhouse.
Sure.
You know, having Facebook and Google, and this is not how you're going to be a player on the world stage.
So let's look at how this concept of multipolarity, which has challenged the traditional powers, how is it influencing international politics in the 21st century?
Well, that's an interesting question, in the sense that if the idea is to try to get the Western elites to come to their senses and abandon their view, their worldview, and we're talking about a worldview that harkens back 500 years now, we may be in, unfortunately, for turbulent times, because it's almost like a drug addict. You know, once you take away, if you take away cold turkey, the substance that he or she relies on, you're going to be witnessing convulsions, withdrawal syndromes, sweats, delirium, crisis, you know. And this is what I think we should prepare for and be prepared to contain that phenomenon for as long as it needs to run its course.
Absolutely.
You understand?
Yeah.
That should be, to me, the priority. Maintain, preserve the future by taking into account that the West as a whole is going to be undergoing, might last 50 years, we don't know. You know? But they're going to have to work their issues on the basis of basically what they have available.
Absolutely.
And, you know, the free meal is over. So this will require, most likely, coming back to on the last 30 years of neoliberal, you know, and the outsourcing,
Yeah.
and the basically the dismantling of the industrial base. This is going to be called back into question. They're going to have to go back to basics and get people to work. And right now, that's the problem. Because the unemployment rates in those countries is sky high,
It's very alarming.
and you cannot live on debt forever because those programs, welfare programs, I mean, are leading those states to bankruptcy. So we're going to be witnessing waves of bankruptcy in the West.
Yeah, actually, witnessing bankruptcy, we cannot talk about the multipolarity and sideline the African continent. I will always come back to it, and it's worrisome that you know there was recently a member of parliament from Togo. I can't recall the name. Made a statement. You know, there won't be, or there can't be a multipolar world without the Russian Federation, and he decried the fact that because countries are aligning with Russia, they're being they're faced with sanctions coming from other countries who think that if you align with Russia, you're already an enemy to the Western countries that are actually fighting the Russian Federation at this particular moment. So now, how do you foresee the future of Africa's engagement, particularly with Russia and other BRICS nations, as far as this concept or the world of multipolarity is concerned?
Well, to be sure, the West is going to always resort to the sanction weapon to try to bring into line the people or the entities, the countries that it considers as straying from the proper path. But that should not dissuade any country is willing to go its own destiny from doing so.
Absolutely.
And the Russian Federation, as it turns out, again, owing to the global, the almost biblical qualitative change that's experienced in the wake of the Ukraine crisis, Russia has become immensely wealthy now. I mean, this was something that the West never anticipated. It now possesses arguably the finest military in the world, and this military is getting better and better by the day. They're showing it on the battlefield. They possess the most sophisticated strategic weapons.
Indeed.
So they can end the world if their sovereignty is there won't be a future without Russia, in other words.
Absolutely.
And you know, owing to its historical role, Russia cannot be cancelled out. And behind Russia you have China, because those two giants have finally understood, after 50 years of the Kissinger doctrine, that their future lies in working together. As long as this is the reality, Africa have got their back taken care of. There won't be a return to the past. So the Europeans will be screaming and kicking like hysterical hyenas, but there's nothing that's going to change that. As long as those fundamentals remain in place, the compact between Russia and China as the driving force behind bringing stability on the African continent, providing win-win partnerships, and making sure that the sprouts of sovereignty genuine sovereignty are allowed to bloom into a beautiful tree throughout the continent. And then we will see people not having the need to leave to Europe, as we've seen the last 50 years.
Absolutely.
You see?
Absolutely.
It's not a fatality. Africa's got everything it needs. And the youth now should be basically convinced that there's something for them to get involved into. That is actually the role of the young Pan-African generation of leaders. They need to really educate the youth. Don't go look for some kind of El Dorado, illusory El Dorado in the West. They have nothing to offer you. It's all, the future is here. You're building it now.
Indeed.
And we have strong partners.
Indeed, the future is here, building it now, and there has been a common balance that Africa is the future. You yourself underlined Africa has all it takes, and it's about ensuring that there is total sovereignty. And here it brings us back to this. If African countries have maybe collaborated with other partners in the years, and today we feel like the continent in terms of development is not what it's supposed to be. So now we are bringing us back to the world of multipolarity, and you talked about working together. How do you think these countries can attain their sovereignty in such a way that they can be at the helm of taking strategic decisions, especially redefining their foreign policies that will help them define their voice at the international level? Because as we talk at a particular moment, we can say for sure that Africa is not fully represented at the international level, especially when taking some global decisions that directly impact the continent.
Well, I think it starts by establishing political stability. And so I will go back to those three countries that you mentioned at the onset of our conversation.
Yeah.
If they can create a compact of international solidarity as between them, and somehow watch each other's back. Mm-hmm. And then once they clear up issues of bearing on security, military security, and military dissuasion from any kind of destabilization coming from outside, then they can start focusing on the economics. Sure. Then they can start renegotiating all the contracts. With the renegotiation of the contract, even if it means going to, the World Trade Organization or any kind of arbitral tribunal.
Indeed, and here we're looking at
one by one, contract by
multilateral
contract.
Institutions.
You have to get all the archives and just re-examine and renegotiate every term of every contract.
Absolutely, which is
it's not very glamorous, but somebody has to do it.
Of course, it's always a gradual process. Yes. Like you said, it's the goal.
But first, is to establish military sovereignty, intelligence sovereignty, and share experiences among those three countries. Absolutely. And then have this phenomenon set the precedent so that it spreads. Because at some point, the population in other countries, except those three countries, Absolutely. Are going to be looking at what goes on there.
Sure.
Oh, we were told that this would not last. Oh, we were told
and
that...
that's actually the question I was about to say, because people are actually looking to see if that Niger, Burkina Faso, Mali, they should fill in their quest to have their sovereignty, and then they'll come in. We said Russia wasn't going to be different from other powers that have been present in the country. So, as an expert, what do you think the Russian Federation, what strategies can they put forth to help ensure that tomorrow, it will not be written down in the books of history that Russia failed in its quest when it wanted to engage fully with African countries?
No, I mean, Russia knows that this is the only approach that has legs.
Sure.
Is to be a benevolent, a good benevolent uncle who's staying out of the way as far as the main aspect of, running a country imply.
Yeah.
But in case there's a need to help mediate dispute, to the extent some of those might and will undoubtedly come to arise. We're here, we're there. And we can invest, we can provide you logistics, we can provide you with engineers, we can provide you with military advisors.
We're now in the 21st century, and we are not blind to the revolution. I will reiterate across Africa. Look at Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, and other French colonies that, even though independent, they discovered that their economies, were still tied to the former colonial master. So now we want to analyze the place of maybe the policies, the foreign policies of these countries that will enable them to completely liberate from the former colonial master, that will help triumph their economies, especially in a time of multilateralism that African countries are embracing new partners that could help solve some of the internal problems the countries are facing. Insecurity is one of such.
Sure. Well, I think it's about consolidating your gains in as far as sovereignty is concerned.
Sure.
So first, it's almost, I would analyze it as if it's like a beachhead. You will land on the beach, but then you need to consolidate. You need to make sure that you can get to the hills.
Indeed.
And so, and take out the enemy positions and the artillery and the machine gun. Otherwise, you're getting gunned down in open space on the beach. There's no place to hide. So what we're saying now with the three countries that you mentioned is a little bit akin to this analysis that I just made. Right now, they really need to consolidate and maintain some kind of political stability. I know a lot of people have been complaining that those military regimes were supposed to be organizing civilian elections.
Yeah.
But you have to understand that the moment you have civilian candidates coming in, if you have not really cleansed the root of the edifice that existed prior, you will once again, duplicate the problem.
In the same position.
So democracy for democracy's sake, used as like a sticker on some kind of product, it makes no sense.
Yeah.
I would rather have an authoritarian figure, which has all the levers of powers in the sense where it knows what it wants and it knows what it doesn't want, and what it wants. What it doesn't want is foreign interference.
Absolutely, yeah.
Then then it should be taken into account. And I think those new governments should keep working every day. There's a lot of work ahead, to be sure. First, to reinforce their security services,
Absolutely.
Intelligence services, because there's going to be constant attempt to destabilize those governments from those former colonial masters and their own instrumentalities. They will be used. They will use Islamic terrorism. They will use secessionist groups. They will use. There's a multiplicity. This is the war, the hybrid warfare.
I without interjecting, just to complement what you said, I quite remember in the Central African Republic, a former head of state being the leader of a rebel group, just because, we're talking about Francois Bozize, the French candidate who stood to challenge Touadéra in the last presidential elections. And then you want to understand, like you quite mentioned, about why we need sometimes military regimes in a country to ensure that
military governments.
I beg your pardon.
Because if it's a regime, the idea is it's installed and it's artificial.
Absolutely, yeah, military government to ensure.
But to the extent they get the assent of the population, they're legitimate, so they're governments. There might be a government composed of military figures, but whereas you could have a regime, a civilian regime, but that is a regime of occupation.
Absolutely, and that's why what we actually want to put an end to in the present context of, you know, it's a fair, the new phase of, I call it new colonialism in Africa, where we see conquest, and the Prime Minister of Ethiopia actually anticipated this, and he said there is some sort of conquest and militarism, and these powers, traditional powers, thinking of they are losing grip of the African continent, they are coming through conquest and militarism. And we are coming to the place where let me call it the government can fight to maintain the sovereignty of countries, like we see the revolution in Mali, Niger, and how it is affecting the relationship between France and these former colonies.
Well, to be sure, France is not going to let go easily. I mean, you know, that would be foolish and naive to think that France is going to just take its personal effects and just vacate the premises after such a long...
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, France considers most of Central and Western Africa like its own private
territories,
courtyard. Not unlike the Americans with South America and the Monroe Doctrine.
Yeah.
You know, so... But this is exactly what is, you know, this is the size of the challenge, is to actually get into the head of the French political class that this mindset has got to go.
Absolutely.
And this is going to take some time, because we're talking about decades of conditioning and self-intoxication in as far as the French elites are concerned.
Absolutely.
They really are convinced that they have a special drawing rights on a good chunk of the African continent.
Yeah.
And so it's a fight that's going to take, I think, you know, quite some time until they realize, you know, that it's just more detrimental in terms of expenses, in terms of investment.
Investment, indeed.
Yeah. But at the same time, it would be a mistake for French elite to think that accepting the winds of change would lead to their own economic needs or energy needs to be jeopardized. I mean, the African countries don't mind trading and doing business. We just want to get a fair share for our resources. It's a very simple concept.
Absolutely,
you know?
yeah.
And so in that sense, you know, what I was referring to earlier in my introduction,